This is not a conspiracy theory. This is what we call ideological dogma. We've put our eggs in the wrong basket. Huge research grants coming from the National Cancer Institute, pharmaceutical industries making drugs. It's not a genetic disease. The origin of cancer comes from chronic.
Probably one of the most learned individuals that I've ever had on this channel.
And what I think is probably the most important interview I've ever done.
An amazing guest.
Dr. Thomas Seyfried.
Professor Thomas Seyfried.
Professor Seyfried.
What's up, you guys? Today I have on the world's leading cancer researcher and cancer biologist who is at this point pretty conclusively showing and proving that our fundamental understanding of how to reverse, cure, manage, and eradicate cancer from our lives is fundamentally flawed. And the work that he is doing with clinics around the world is actually working. So I think it's really important to mention too, in honor of objective truth, that Dr. Seyfried has no loyalty to carnivore. He has no loyalty to meat-based, vegan, plant-based, or any of that. I try really hard to bring on truthful, objective information that we can all pull from. His research actually applies to anyone who is observing those lifestyles. So regardless of what you subscribe to, this, in my opinion, will dramatically benefit you. In 2022, there are 1.9 million new cancer cases. And in 2024, there's projected to be well over 2 million. So if we were doing something right, the numbers would obviously be going in the reverse. And we're not. I encourage everybody to share this with anybody that might benefit from it. And let's get into it. What results are you getting? Do you know what I mean?
I have developed the best animal models for cancer that exist, for metastatic cancer, for brain cancer. I have studied the science of cancer for many, many years. I have validated what Otto Warburg, the great biochemist from the last century, had done.
And you're doing it in mice?
In mice and people. People work. The results are much, much better in people than the mice. I can't believe we never see the response in mice that we get in humans. We have clinics around the world that are starting to move into these approaches.
So what is it that's actually causing cancer, and what is it that people are saying is causing cancer? If you could clarify those two things for me, please.
Yeah, well, obviously, if everyone were to do things the way we did in the past, and I mean the far past, 50,000 years ago, cancer was not known. And people would say, well, how would you know 50,000 years ago? But the issue is that Aboriginal tribes, which we have still in certain societies, cancer is extremely rare in those folks. And they've been looked at very extensively by skilled physicians and not defined cancer. So what are these guys doing? Why they're members of our species? Why is cancer so low in certain groups of people that live according to their traditional ways? It seems to be that once they stop those traditional ways, cancer explodes, along with other chronic disorders like diabetes, obesity, dementia, all these kinds of things. So it seems like when you make this transition from traditional ways to more modern American diet lifestyle issues, you seem to have all of an onset of these chronic diseases. Obesity has now started to replace smoking as the number one risk factor for cancer. So you say to yourself, well, what does that have to do with cancer? And the answer is that type 2 diabetes, obesity creates a systemic inflammation in your body. And inflammation, chronic inflammation, can damage the way cells generate energy. Mm-hmm. So all of the cells in our body, with the exception of red blood cells, use oxygen to generate energy very, very efficiently. And that's the reason why you and I are breathing, because every breath of air we take in has oxygen, and that facilitates the cells to produce energy. Now, when we damage that capability, which is an organelle inside the cell called the mitochondrion, but if it happens chronically from systemic inflammation, you chronically damage the ability of the cell to generate energy through oxygen, and the cell then can transition over to an ancient way of getting energy called fermentation, energy without oxygen. And when that energy without oxygen comes, the cell often loses its ability to remain quiescent and controlled, and then it falls back on a state of dysregulated growth, which obviously is cancer. So The origin of cancer comes from chronic damage to the respiratory control of the cell, the ability of the cell to generate energy through oxygen, and they fall back on ancient pathways from hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years ago, to generate energy without oxygen, and that's called fermentation.
Okay, so let me stop you right there because that makes a lot of sense to me. Basically, it's when your cells can't use oxygen, or their ability, the mitochondria's ability to use oxygen to generate energy is broken. What do you mean by fermentation? I've heard you say that a couple times. What does that really mean
Well,
for like
fermentation is
talk to me
energy,
like I'm six.
energy without oxygen. Okay?
Energy without oxygen.
Yeah, energy without oxygen.
Well, so really quick, just to outline what you said there. So you're saying fermentation is when the body's cells are using an alternative fuel source, which is typically glucose or something, and glutamine instead of oxygen. They should be.
Yes.
Okay.
But in the cancer cells, you see, over long periods of time, they have slowly lost that ability. Lose that ability from chronic inflammation, intermittent damage, chemical carcinogens, radiation, oncogenic viruses. All of these things will chronically disrupt that ability of the cell to get energy through oxygen. But if the cell can't transition through the fermentation, it will die and never become a cancer cell.
I see. So the cancer cells have lost the ability to gain energy through oxygen, but they can get it through glucose and glutamine. And if we fuel the body with glucose and glutamine, there goes the growth of the cell.
Yeah. And how do you know that? When we give cyanide to people, like Jonestown there, when that guy drank the Kool-Aid with all the cyanide. Remember they call it drinking the Kool-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
Killed 500 or 600 people right on the spot. Everybody knows cyanide will kill you real quick. Cyanide blocks oxidative phosphorylation, causing very short death within a minute or two. You're dead. Okay? Well, cancer cells, you can pour cyanide all over a tumor cell. It doesn't die because it's not using oxidative phosphorylation. They grow in hypoxia. They grow without oxygen. And the question is, how did they do that? And that was a chronic damage to their mitochondria. So when you look at if you take any tumor from any person's body, or any brain cancer, colon cancer, bladder cancer, lung cancer, breast cancer, you find, and you look under the electron microscope, invariably you find abnormalities in the number, structure, and function of that organelle. So the organelle that maintains our cells in an appropriate position and stable and working is the mitochondria. And when that organelle loses its ability to generate energy through oxygen, the cell falls back on ancient pathways of fermentation. And those ancient pathways are associated with dysregulated cell growth.
Okay. So to sum this up, I think, people aren't always, as science savvy, and you've done a really, really good job actually of just explaining that, simply put. So I'm going to do my best to say it back in simpleton words. Basically, like I said, it's like, our cells are supposed to generate energy through oxygen. Our mitochondria is as well. But ultimately, over time, cells get damaged through, we'll talk about that in a moment, but ultimately it's sounds like inflammation is what's causing those issues. So the cells get damaged, and then basically the cell can no longer generate energy through oxygen. So it defaults to fermentation, which is essentially gathering energy from glucose and glutamine, which is probably defaulting. It's the secondary version of energy that the cell can use, but it can only do that, for a short period of time. And obviously, if the oxygen isn't going to come back, which it won't, the body will continue to fuel, or the cells will continue to be fueled by the glucose and glutamine. And so, that's kind of just what it falls back on as far as how to continue.
Only the cancer cells, the normal cells, if they don't get the oxygen back, they're dead.
Oh, that's right. You were saying, because the cancer cells have adapted or something to be able to live off of that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, and for people who real quick, for people who don't understand glucose and glutamine, obviously we should all learn what that is, but what would be how does the body get glucose? How does it get glutamine?
Glutamine is the most abundant amino acid in our bloodstream. It's an amino acid. Don't forget, proteins are synthesized from amino acids. So amino acid is a protein building block. But glutamine is a fuel for our immune system, our gut. Our gut depends a lot on glutamine. our immune system, the urea cycle. So it's a very, very essential kind of a molecule, the glutamine. And glucose, where do we get that from? Well, we eat food, and the food is broken down into glutamine, into glucose.
Mm-hmm.
And the glucose then fuels the mitochondria to produce energy through oxidative phosphorylation. On the other hand, if the oxidative phosphorylation, the ability to get energy from oxygen, is compromised, that glucose is metabolized to lactic acid. And the energy then is coming from a lactic acid fermentation metabolism, which all cancer cells seem to be robust in lactic acid fermentation. And our new big thing is that they're also in a glutamine fermentation. They're using both these two fuels without oxygen, and that's keeping them going. So, I know you just have to say, okay, if every cancer cell is getting energy without oxygen, where are they getting their ability to grow? What other sources? And I say fermentation. Okay, what's driving the fermentation? Glucose, which has always been known to do that. But the new thing now is that glutamine can drive a fermentation metabolism, and that's our big discovery. We have two fuels, the glucose and the glutamine, both synergistic with each other. It's unbelievable. The two pathways that drive these two fuels are powerfully interactive, and that allows this cancer cell to grow very robustly as long as it has the availability of glucose and glutamine. So without glucose and glutamine, the tumor cell can't grow. It dies.
And so how do we get glucose and glutamine? How does one get it? How does one reduce glucose and glutamine?
Well,
Quick one here, you guys. So I know how challenging it can be sometimes to find a local farmer. And that's why I want to share with you my farmer. This guy has the whole thing down 100%. I have never had better tasting meat in my life. I'm not just saying that. You know, I don't tell you about things that I don't actually use myself. It's called Suretail Creek Farm. This is a pound of ground beef, and I have one of these, at least one a day, as well as their eggs. And I love everything else that they have on there. They have so much variety. They have organ meats, they have pork, they have chicken, everything that you would need. But if you are in need of a local farmer and you want somebody that's raising animals regeneratively and you want something that tastes good and there's no hormones added, I highly recommend these guys because this is literally how I live my life. Everything I eat comes from these guys, not even kidding. They will ship anywhere in the country. If you use the link below, they'll actually provide a discount automatically. And if you are looking to actually save a lot of money in costs, because I know meat can be expensive, then I recommend buying it in bulk. Get a half cow, get a full cow, split it with some neighbors or some friends or some family, and then you can get the meat hyper discounted, along with all the rest of the stuff that you can get on there too. So anyways, you guys, link is below, and let's get back to the show.
How does one reduce glucose and glutamine?
Well, water-only fasting, calorie restriction, this kind of thing will reduce blood sugar down to a much lower level, a level so low enough that the tumor cells start to die. The glutamine cannot be, there's heavy exercise can lower blood glutamine, but it's not enough. It doesn't lower it enough to actually kill the tumor cell. So, but it helps. But if you put a drug in that targets small doses of glutamine targeting drugs, it's just enough when you have low blood sugar to push those cancer cells into oblivion. They can't survive. So the key thing is we know exactly what the tumor cell needs to grow. They need fermentation. What are the fuels for fermentation? And that's the glucose, sugar, and the glutamine amino acid. And if you can shut down fermentation in the body and transition the body over to fuels that the normal cells can use, like fatty acids and ketone bodies, then the tumor cells become marginalized. And not only do they become marginalized, their inefficiency, especially when the body is under energetic stress for a while, the body will turn on the tumor cell and eat it. The body will turn and use the tumor cells as fuel for the normal cells of the body. So this is another interesting thing. It's called autolytic cannibalism, where the body looks for things that aren't carrying its weight. When you're under energy stress, every cell in your body better justify their existence of that cell.
Right.
And if that cell is not energy efficient, it's going to be reconfigured, either eliminated and consumed, or the internal organelles like the mitochondria, autophagy. The cell becomes to be super energy efficient. Cancer cells can't do that. They're energy inefficient. They're not flexible. So the body will actually turn on them and eat them. And but you have to get into a very low energy. You have to get into a zone of energy stress before the body is going to turn and eat the tumor cells. And you can do that water only fasting, calorie restricted, prolonged calorie restricted ketogenic diets. There's a lot of ways the body can get into these zones. And then you throw in a little drug that will target the glutamine pathway, the glutaminolysis pathway. And the next thing you know, you're slaughtering these tumor cells. So you say to yourself, well, why? If that's the solution or a solution for cancer management, why nobody's doing that? And the answer is they think cancer is a genetic disease. So they're not even thinking about this.
Right. Yeah. That's, I had my boyfriend of 5 years, the first boyfriend I ever had, like a high school sweetheart type of boyfriend. His mom passed away from cancer, actually, only like a few months into us seeing each other. But I remember it was so sudden. I couldn't even really believe it. None of us could, but she was diagnosed because she went to the doctor for something different, something on her elbow. She fell biking. And then they're like, oh, she suddenly had like stage 3, stage 4 cancer suddenly out of nowhere. And then they put her on, basically all the medications and chemotherapy and everything. And personally, I think she passed away because of the chemo. She was strong, but she was little. And I mean, it happened in 6 weeks, right? So it wasn't like this long drawn out process, but yeah, it sounds, so let's talk a little bit about that. I want to go back to the fasting thing too.
We now realize that about 50% of the people that are treated with these chemo, they die from the treatments rather than the cancer.
Yeah. That's what we kind of were like.
What you experienced is not unusual.
I know.
When people die that quick, it's usually from the treatments.
Yeah, it was so sudden, and we were just blown away by it. So yeah, let's talk about what standard science is saying. And I also want to preface this too, because in a lot of these conversations, I think you can easily label our conversation as a conspiracy, right? Where it's like, oh, these are being conspired. But ultimately, the more I learn about all these things, it really just seems like there's new science that's coming out that we need to progress. It's like stepping stones forward, but I would be curious to hear your thoughts about that. So what is the standard of science say that's causing cancer? You said it's, genetic based. And then also, why isn't this what you're talking about coming to the forefront?
Well, yeah, it was, you have to realize I'm not the guy saying this for the first time. This is not. Otto Warburg said all this a long time ago in the last century. He was the giant of biochemistry at that time. Okay. He received the Nobel Prize for his work on the cytochrome enzyme in 1931. He was absolutely certain that cancer was a disorder of energy metabolism. And I went back and don't forget, this was a giant in the field, this guy Warburg. He has a very interesting history because he was half Jewish. And he lived in Germany during the Second World War, and Hitler feared cancer. And they were not going to put him in the gas chamber because Hitler felt that this is the guy that was going to cure cancer. And Hitler was feared. Otto Warburg was seeing this stuff 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I said, why has everybody walked away from him? And they went on and just did all these kinds of things. And that's the dominant theory that exists today for the National Cancer Institute and the majority of all major hospitals and pharmaceutical companies. They think cancer is a genetic disease, and we're developing all these new therapies for cancer based on targeting mutations and precision medicine and personalized therapy. You hear all these terms. And the reason we have 1,700 people a day in the United States dying from cancer, which is 70 an hour, by the way, it's because we've put our eggs in the wrong basket. It's not a genetic disease. All those mutations come as downstream effects of damage to oxidative phosphorylation. So this is the thing. The damage to the energy metabolism causes the mutations in the nucleus that everybody's chasing and think is the cause of the cancer. So, right. And this is why we're not making any major progress. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is what we call ideological dogma. When you are indoctrinated and brainwashed into thinking something is what it is, there's no way in hell you're going to change your mind. It's like a religion, man. It doesn't change.
Yeah, it's like people. I see.
Religion is an indoctrination of the brain. The somatic mutation theory is an indoctrination of the academic brain. huge research grants coming from the National Cancer Institute and all of these places. That's pharmaceutical industries making drugs, all based on the somatic mutation theory. And God forbid somebody comes along and says it's not a genetic, it's not due to somatic mutations. What are you going to do? You're going to be ignored. You're saying something that's uncomfortable to an entire industry. But I got 1,700 people a day dying as the result of this discomfort.
Which, anything else, 70 people a day.
No, 70 an hour.
An hour, I'm sorry.
1,700, almost 1,700 people a day dying from cancer in the United States.
Yeah, which it is, obviously we are aware, right? There's all of these cancer cure organizations and there's things that are there, but it's like there seems to be this lack of desire to explore these types of solutions. And I'm asking you genuinely if you think it has anything to do with the fact that you can't financially tie solutions as well as you could to fasting and reducing sugar. Do you think that there's something to that? Because the more and more I look, it's not necessarily that people are evil. It's not that people aren't trying to fix cancer, but you can't tie it to some kind of pill if that's the solution, which is reducing sugar, right? And allowing for fasting, which is eating less food.
How is that going to go? Who's going to do a clinical trial on that, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like,
but it's not, as I said, the entrepreneur has not yet emerged who knows how to make a profit on metabolic therapy. Don't forget, the new field is going to be called metabolic oncology. Okay. It's going to replace or slowly replace chemotherapy, radiation therapy, immunotherapy. All of those are, here's the situation. Nobody wants to be poisoned and irradiated to get healthy. Doctors don't even want to do it. The patient doesn't want it.
Right.
So why do we keep doing it? Because we put $100 billion into the Cancer Genome Project with the hope that our understanding of the cancer genetics would allow us to develop precision medicine so we wouldn't have to use toxic poisons and radiation. And the problem is cancer is not a genetic disease, so that was $100 million flushed away. Because if those therapies really did produce a really good reduction, if we had something that would reduce cancer by 50% in 5 years, we'd stick with it. We'd say, whoa, we're definitely on the right path. Mm-hmm. The problem is it's not a genetic disease. So the theory under which they wasted $100 billion, not even more than $100 billion.
Yeah.
That theory is incorrect. And when you have an incorrect theory, there's no amount of money you can throw at the project if the theory is incorrect. So until we change the view of what the origin of the disease is as a mitochondrial metabolic disorder, which can be managed better, more effectively by restricting glucose and glutamine while transitioning the body over to fatty acids and ketones, until that becomes more widely known and appreciated, you're not going to get any major change in this disorder. And more people are going to suffer and die as the result of this.
So are you getting... Two questions on that. Pick which one you want to go for, I guess, next, because they're both in my mind. Are you getting people that are giving you a lot of pushback from this at all, or are you getting support? And then the other question is, let's say, how about you answer that one first? But I also want to say, how have you seen in your studies people get into ketosis?
Oh, ketosis. Well, let's push back.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from so much the scientific community. They just ignore it.
Okay.
Where you get it more is in the oncology clinic itself. Mm-hmm. So people hear what I say on these YouTubes and all this kind of stuff, and they say they run into the oncology, Dana-Farber, MD Anderson, Sloan Kettering, wherever they go, and they say, I want metabolic therapy. And the oncologist, there's no evidence to support that. Wow. And they, no. Glucose has nothing to do with cancer. Did you know that? Glucose has nothing to do with cancer. This is what they tell the patients.
Well, it's great. The number of times I've talked to a lot of people on here, different viewpoints, and it's always that there's no data to support that. But where I get so frustrated by that is that I'm saying, like, there was no data to support your point of view before there was data. You had to start somewhere to figure it out. So why aren't we at least investigating things if we're seeing solutions?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Why don't you ask? I tell people, go ask the director of the National Cancer Institute. Here's the situation. we have interrogated these tumor cells. And when you grow them, we take away everything that they could survive on. And then we add stuff back to find out what they can survive on. So if you take them and put them in say a salt solution in the culture dish, they're all dead in 24 hours. No mystery. You have nothing to eat, they die.
Yeah.
Okay, then you start adding stuff back and you find out, what if I add something back and they perk up and start growing again? Oh, that looks like something that might keep them alive in the body, right? So we tested everything, and the only thing we could find is glucose and glutamine, the only two fuels. And nobody has shown us any tumor cell that can survive on fuels other than glucose and glutamine. That tells you how anybody not know that? So when you tell them that, and you know what they say, well, if I take away glucose and glutamine from my my experiments, all my cells will be dead and I won't have anything to study. And I said, that's right. That tells you right there you don't have anything to study. I mean, you don't have to be a light bulb to know what's going on here. Oh, but I just got a $5 million grant from the NCI to study all these gene expression profiles in culture. I'm going to target this gene and that gene. But if I take away glucose and glutamine, all my cells will die. I won't have anything to study.
Wow.
And I said, aha.
Wow.
So why don't you do it on living people and see what happens? Oh, if I target glucose and glutamine, the damn tumor cells start to shrink up and die.
Wait, that's crazy. Wait, is that
That's
like
how simple it is? That's the problem. They've made this cancer thing into a big boondoggle. Everybody thinks it's the most oh my God, it has 100 mutations and it's this degree and that degree.
Right.
It's such a simple ass disease. If anybody knew how dumb these tumor cells are, they can't live without glucose and glutamine, and they can't transition over to ketone bodies. So that tells you the solution to the cancer, or a management strategy for managing cancer, right there in those few words that I just said. And guess what? Nobody can believe it. And when they test it, they shut up, and you go to the clinics and ask the doctors, hey, all you have to do is target. Oh, you can't do that. It's too hard. Oh, these ketogenic. Listen, you want to live? And we even published the glucose ketone index calculator. Lets cancer patients know what zone they're in to start killing cancer cells. And we already quantified this treatment strategy. But when you go to the clinics, they won't use it. They won't use it because they're told that cancer is a genetic disease. It's
the dogma.
Yes,
it's the dogma. So
it's a dogma.
So
it's
so
not
if
a conspiracy theory, that's a dogma. It's
So it's all right. So that's crazy. They're like, oh well, the thing won't be there anymore to test if I do that.
Right? Isn't it embarrassing to talk
That's
about?
embarrassing.
It's
crazy. So simply put, then what you're saying is the body needs to be able to lower inflammation to do that, so we can allow the cells to basically starve the cancer cells. And to do that, I imagine one of the solutions that you keep mentioning is go into ketosis, which from my experience going into ketosis, from what I coach people on, is like you basically reduce all access to sugar and carbs that you're consuming for a period of time, and or combine that with fasting in some way, shape, or form. Right? So are you saying then that from what you've seen, you do that? You basically go to a very low carb diet, and
what we do is a lot of folks who come into the clinics. Now, I'm not a physician, so I can't tell anybody what to do or what not to do. I do the science, and then I work with physicians to help with their patients. So you really have to take that individual and slowly transition him back into a more healthy state. Follow a Paleolithic diet and lifestyle, tremendous amounts of exercise, eating low carbohydrate, natural foods. The probability of getting cancer is very rare. And that our Aboriginal people living according to traditional ways have shown that. And it's only when those populations shift into the great American diet and lifestyle they all of a sudden explode with every kind of a chronic disease you can imagine. It's
terrible.
True.
I know.
Yeah.
Everything
That's
explodes.
one of our greatest exports to the rest of the world is the great American diet and lifestyle.
Yep.
And now we have a worldwide obesity epidemic. Our brains are highly geared for the pleasure of having sugary things.
Sure.
And we had it for the most of our existence as a species on the planet. We didn't have this. And then in a short period of time, we have an abundance of it, and boom, everybody.
And we're losing it. We're losing it. So going back, because I want to make sure I really understand this, because I think we need to be clear on this for people listening. There's a lot of tribes, the carnivore tribe, the animal-based tribe, vegan, vegetarian. It's like, ultimately, in my opinion, everybody would just really remove ultra processed foods. You're going to do a lot better, right? Move your body, get in the sun, get in the ground, those kinds of things, have friends, all those things.
Well, it's Lauren, it's so easy to say that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're commuting to New York City from Connecticut, you're
tough.
sitting your ass in a traffic jam day in and day out. The frustration in your body builds up.
Yeah.
Or most any big American city. You can go to Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles. People are sitting in traffic. They're not and they're eating a donut or something like this. I mean, our diet and lifestyle is putting us at risk for all this. We can't, walk to work. We're living 30 miles away.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's a variety of things. So easy to say this, but for a lot of people earning a living, it's can be difficult.
Sure.
To do that. So that's why we developed the glucose ketone index calculator. We published, it's open access. People can go look at it. It was made to manage cancer. But now I notice that a lot of young folks like yourself who want to stay fit, they'll go out and just measure their GKI under different exercise levels and different diets. And if you can get into 2.0 or below, you're going to be killing tumor cells. But if you can get into 5 or 8 in that region, you're also healthy. But for killing tumor cells, you got to go down because you got to get rid of these cells and you got to put the pressure back on them. And then once you're in these states of a low GKI, glucose ketone index, which is the ratio of blood sugar to ketone bodies and millimolar in the blood, it's a little calculator. Keto Mojo now makes it so you just push a button and it will give you the ratio. But if you do that, then we bring in low doses of drugs to target the glutamine. So it doesn't make any difference if you're a plant eater, a fish eater, a meat eater. If you can get your GKI down to that 2.0 below, feel free to do Mediterranean, whatever diet you want. Then people will say, "Boy, what am I? Oh man, I'm eating this. I eat less of it." And then all of a sudden you say, "The only way I can get in there is just drink water."
Okay, so.
But no, I've had some carnivores get into the zone and vegans too. But then they learn, what do I have today? Today my big meal is a quarter of a Brussels sprout. Okay, that's your big meal for the day. You got to love it, right? So, so everybody is different. So I don't know what to say.
Yeah, and I know you've been pressed on that quite a bit. I think the thing is like it sounds like the two solutions are very different depending on what area you're in. If you're preventing cancer, sure, like you want to make sure that you're eating, by the sounds of it, tell me where I'm wrong. You want to make sure that you're eating your GKI would be low enough, 5 to 8, within 5 to 8 range, right? But regardless,
if you want to kill cancer cells, you should go lower than that.
Well, right.
But
so if you're like on the day to day is like a 4 or 5.
Yeah. You can do that. Yeah. It takes about 2 or 3 days to get down to that zone
and keep it there.
So people need to know, again, the GKI will tell you what you should or should not eat, and keeping a low GKI, you'll lose weight. For sure, you lose weight. I mean, there's no question about it.
Well, I really help me understand this too. If you're eating plants, if you're having a plant-based diet, you're not eating fewer carbs. Are you at higher risk for developing these issues?
No, it depends on how much you eat.
Is it okay? So it's the quantity of food?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so like fasting windows or something like that?
Yes. But I mean, I don't know. Every person who's a plant eater should do the GKI and come out and see what they get. I don't know. I know carnivore guys. There's guys on the web that talk about getting their GKI into these low ranges.
Yeah.
So, a highly nutritious, restricted diet will certainly bring you down into a state of ketosis. And if you're in that state, now your body responds to very low dose chemo and radiation in such a more effective way as well. Yeah. So here again, you can still incorporate some aspects of the traditional standards of care, but using it in much, much lower concentrations and getting so much more therapeutic efficacy. Mm-hmm. Nobody should have to lose hair, baldness, and all that stuff is nuts. Right. That means you're treated with somebody who has no clue what's going on. So, and you start looking around and you say, this guy knows what he's doing, or this guy's out to lunch. He doesn't know what he's doing. So, and this is the way we're going to eventually manage cancer. Once the medical community realizes that cancer is a mitochondrial metabolic disease, the numbers and strategies will be so beautiful and so many kinds of ways we can do this. As long as somebody can transition making a buck, make some living on this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how are we gonna transition this multi-mega billion-dollar cancer industry into something that we can do and still generate revenue, but also make the patients healthy? Drop the cancer death rate by 50% in 5 to 10 years. I said this over and over again. Even Warburg said this. You can prevent 80% of cancers. All cancer can be prevented with the correct diet and lifestyle. But you can also manage cancer with the correct diet and lifestyle and the help of certain small amounts of drugs. The whole platform on how we manage cancer has to change if people really want to make a difference in this disorder. And what I'm saying is based on hard science, done by Otto Warburg and large numbers of other scientists, and ourselves included. We're just on a path from over 100 years, moving in the right direction. The field just happened to go off on the wrong path with the wrong theory. And once the theory is recognized as a mitochondrial metabolic disorder, we're back on the right track. And this is where you're going to start to see big reductions in death and also improved quality of life and all these kinds of things.
Right. So, okay, for people that need, let's talk solution then. To wrap this up, somebody's trying to, let's say, have their best bet at being healthy. Let's say a person who doesn't have cancer yet, myself. Best way to go is probably get a GKI so I can understand what that looks like.
Yeah, you can buy the it's the Keto Mojo meter. You can get it from Amazon.
Got you. Bring it down to a 2 consistently or lower, and then
lower.
fast.
Yeah.
Yep. And then fast. And then for those of us that are not, hopefully ever will be in that phase of life, but you just want to control your inflammation, understand that this is a metabolic disease. So if we give our cancer cells access to basically a lot of sugar, that will create an opportunity for them to grow. So we want to minimize sugar. That's what we want to do. Okay. I really appreciate it.